Joining me now, Democratic Congressman Adam Smith of Washington, the top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee. Let me ask you first a basic question. When and how did you learn of the strikes?
I learned on it from the news, basically. I learned it when everyone else did. So I don't know exactly what the Secretary means by notification. It doesn't sound to me like they complied with the War Powers Act to notify Congress.
So if they did not comply with the War Powers Act, does Congress have recourse?
Well, not really. Well, we have recourse to say that was wrong. We can go to a court and we can say, we violated the law. But look, what the president did here is definitely outside of the War Powers Resolution, and I think outside of the Constitution. Now, to be fair, it's not inconsistent with what other presidents have done. As your previous guest outlined, over the course of the last 20 or 30 years now, it's slowly slipped to the point where the president has complete control over the use of the U.S. military, which is not what the Constitution intended. And I think it's a huge problem that the executive has that much authority. But again, I think President Trump was wrong. He went against the Constitution, but it's not really that inconsistent with what previous presidents did. That doesn't make it right. But I just want to be accurate about it.
So let's talk about where this brings us to. The Iranian foreign minister said Iran, quote, reserves all options to defend its security. What are you expecting? Do you think there will be retaliation? What might it look like?
Yeah, look, there's two great unknowns about this, and that's the big one. What will Iran do in response? And I don't think anyone knows for sure, but it is hard to imagine that Iran would allow this type of attack by the U.S. to happen without some response. Certainly when Israel attacked them, they've been attacking Israel back, and one would expect they would do the same thing to us. Now, there's a number of different options. We have a lot of bases in the region. We have bases in Qatar, Bahrain, UAE, Iraq, Syria. Iran could certainly launch missiles at any of those bases. Iran also has a lot of militias, proxies in Iraq primarily, that could launch attacks. They've done that before and they could do it again. That is what I would expect, is some level of attack, either directly from Iran or from their proxies on U.S. forces. The completely unpredictable part about it is how successful will that attack be? And then what do we do in response to that?
Well, you mentioned those other U.S. bases we've talked a lot about in the last couple of days, 40,000 U.S. troops in the region. The Al Assad Air Base, obviously, which is an Iraqi installation. I think it's about 150 miles outside of Baghdad. Are you confident in the military's ability to be prepared for whatever comes its way?
Well, I'm confident they're prepared. I'm not confident that we can stop whatever comes in. Yeah, we have force protection measures in place. We have counter-drone, missile defense technology. But to think that they're going to get every drone and every missile that could come at them. We had the attack after the killing of Soleimani at, I think it was Al Assad Air Base, where dozens of Iranian missiles got in and struck. Now, fortunately, we had gotten the troops out. They didn't hit any place where we suffered casualties, but the missiles themselves were not stopped. So no, I don't think we have the military capability to block all of it. Some of it, yes. So it seems that casualties are distinctly likely, and that's why this was such an incredibly risky move. Make no mistake about it, President Trump just started a war with Iran, and every war I've ever heard about is highly unpredictable in terms of where it goes. The military has a saying, the enemy gets a vote. So we are now in a war with Iran, and we're not sure where it's going to go.
When we just heard from Pete Hegseth, he was very clear. He said this was not about regime change, that this was very limited. Is your suggestion in saying that we are now in a war, that this is not over by any means, by any measure?
Yeah, no, I think the odds of this being over are remote. I suppose it could happen. It could happen that Iran just decides to capitulate and let this go. I think that is a highly unlikely scenario. Not impossible, to be sure. I do think it's helpful that Secretary Hegseth made clear that regime change was not the goal. That takes it down a little bit. But look, we bombed Iran. That is an act of war by any definition. And Iran will likely respond to it. And again, I'll just make the point. We don't know where this is going from here. And Iran just got dragged into war. And remember, this is the one thing that President Trump said that he wouldn't do. A lot of people voted for President Trump because they felt that the U.S. had been too involved in foreign conflicts. And he ran around the country saying he was going to be the one who was going to pull us out of that and not do that. And he just directly dragged us into a war, frankly, for the first time probably since Iraq, maybe at least since Libya. So, goes directly contrary to what he promised the American people he would do, and does place us at risk without any question.
To that point, let me ask you about something very specific that the defense secretary said, which is, and I think I'm quoting him directly here, I was taking simultaneous notes. He said the scope of this was intentionally limited, but our capabilities are nearly unlimited. How do you read that statement?
Yeah, well, the limited part, I agree with. I think he's right. It was limited, and clearly this was a strike that was intended to set back Iran's nuclear program. That's the other big unanswered question, by the way, is how much did we set back Iran's nuclear program, and how quickly could they reconstitute it? But the second part, it scares me considerably to have a Secretary of Defense who thinks that our capabilities are unlimited. Nobody's capabilities are unlimited. Obviously we have limits in the number of troops we have, the number of weapons we have. So I don't know what he means by saying that our capabilities are unlimited. I know that by the strictest definition of that word, that is not true.
Well, he did say nearly unlimited, but your point is well taken. And on a Sunday morning,
yes.
I much appreciate you, Democratic Congressman Adam Smith of Washington, for joining us. Thank you.